new. And today's session will be on the topic of transitioning into NLP. You could open the Slido link, and the questions we aim to answer are mainly from non-NLP background students who want to get an NLP-based academic career or industry career, what type of things you're curious about. Great. So we will start with a brief introduction. I think most of the questions we will do first alphabetical, then anti-alphabetical order of the family name. So maybe we'll start with a 5-minute intro of Kai-Wei.
Okay, yes. So my name is Kai-Wei Chang. So I'm an associate professor at the UCLA. Yeah, so my research is mostly working on trustworthy NLP and also multimodality in NLP. Yeah, so I have a kind of a little bit non-traditional NLP background because I start with working on optimization. Yeah, so when I was a master's student, I'm mostly working on how to improve the training speed of the linear model. So we was developing the library called LibLinear at that time. Yeah, so that time we are mostly working on programming and how to make the program faster. Yeah, so we can train the linear model faster. So I started to touch NLP when I joined Professor Dan Roth's group as an NLP researcher. So that time my project is mostly focused on how to improve the training for the structure prediction model. Yeah, because that time everybody is working on graphical model, like everyone is working on deep learning now. But one problem with a graphical model is that the training can take a lot of time. So I was most working on the optimization of that, but then I working more and more toward the NLP problem. Yeah, and when I become a faculty, I started thinking more on what would be the key problem in the NLP. So that's why I focus on the trustworthy NLP as my research now. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Kai-Wei, for sharing the experience of transitioning into NLP from different problem space. And now let's move to Lucy.
Hi. So I think my name is Lucy Wang. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Washington Information School. And I think I also have a fairly non-traditional background into NLP. I actually do not have a computer science background. So I started in mostly biomedical engineering and the health side of applications. And now I currently focus on how machine learning and NLP techniques can help us make sense of scientific output and help people make better, more evidence-driven health care decisions. So a little bit about how I got here. So after my undergrad, I actually worked for a number of years at essentially these biomedical engineering startups, working on medical devices. For a variety of things. The last startup I worked at was building a kind of large stereotactic radiosurgery device for treating breast cancer patients non-invasively using radiation therapy. So in that work, I think or I guess throughout all of these work experiences, I really interacted a lot with patients and also with kind of the more modeling side of things, where we were essentially trying to come up with an optimization towards creating these treatment plans that we could apply to these breast cancer patients non-invasively, that would also minimize damage to the surrounding tissues around the breast cancer that they had. So there were some optimization problems involved, and that's what got me into wanting to do a PhD to really kind of better understand the biomedical resources that were available to help people make these healthcare decisions. Like, how do you choose between surgery, radiation therapy versus some other non-invasive treatment? So I did my PhD at the University of Washington in the Department of Biomedical Informatics and Medical Education. And I would say that my transition from kind of this health informatics space into NLP really happened while I was there. It came, I would say it was born out of this frustration with the existing structured biomedical resources that were out there. So I worked a lot with biomedical ontologists to kind of to see how they created a lot of these structured knowledge resources. And I found that the process of creating these resources was rather frustrating and also slow. And I think that maybe the first time I really thought that NLP was like the direction that people should go in was I like back in 2014 or something like that. I think Hui Feng Poon visited and gave a talk and talked about how essentially you could mine all of these entities and relationships out of the literature that could be used for better drug discovery in the cancer space. And that the literature was a much faster moving and realistic corpus of information than some of these structured knowledge resources. So that's when I sort of took the dive. The latter half of my PhD, I started focusing much more on NLP techniques. I then spent a couple years at the Allen Institute for AI, where I'm still part-time affiliated, working on essentially biomedical applications of NLP. So happy to share any parts of that experience that might help others in figuring out their transition into this field.
Great. Thanks a lot for both of the intro. I have already lots of questions on my side as well. So maybe before we enter into the discussion, my background is I'm a NLP PhD. I'm currently in my third year now. And I think I started doing NLP as a CS major undergraduate student in my second year of undergraduate. So I guess the most rough period was second year, third year, fourth year as undergraduates, trying to understand what NLP actually mean, and then applying for NLP PhDs. So I see that go ahead. Never mind. Yeah. So I see the transitioning into NLP could be asked for a different career stage. A bunch of people are interested in PhD programs in NLP. And then that's like for super early stage career students or gap year people interested in NLP PhD programs. And then later on, it could be PhDs already in other programs like in healthcare. Then thinking about adding NLP technology into the thing that they're interested in. So potentially we could start with like pre-PhD setting, the super early career. I know that a lot of people will feel like inconfident, let's say if their local school doesn't have good NLP professors. So it's not really a path for them to take an undergraduate course taught by famous profs leading the NLP community. Maybe conditioned on that scenario, what could be some good suggestion to start doing NLP and prepare for a PhD application profile. Maybe we could start with Lucy as we do the alphabetical then anti-alphabetical.
Sure. So this is more at the kind of post-bachelor level or kind of maybe during the bachelor's.
Yes.
So I think you raised a couple of interesting points. One thing is, what if you come from a school that isn't well known for NLP, or maybe you go to an undergraduate institution that doesn't have a lot of research opportunities? What could one do? I think these days there are a lot more resources in terms of getting oneself up to speed on the latest NLP technologies. So a little bit of self-teaching does go a long way. I've also seen people sort of reach out and try to essentially get some more volunteer research experience in one of these larger NLP labs at one of these larger research institutions. I know that's not always easy, but kind of putting yourself out there, really kind of doing your homework about who you think you might want to work with, and kind of telling them, reaching out and telling faculty members why you think they should accept you as a volunteer researcher over kind of other people who contact them. I think that can really lead to opportunities and doors opening. So for people who are maybe struggling with like a feeling like they don't have opportunities presenting themselves at their local institution, it is so much, much of us, many of us researchers now do at least 50% or more of our work remotely through Zoom meetings. So it's not atypical to collaborate or mentor students from other institutions and things like that. And then I'll just say one more thing. So a lot of universities maybe don't have an NLP focus, but there are still these kind of project capstones that undergraduates can get involved in. And some of those might have NLP focus. And for someone who's interested in this domain, seek out those projects, connect with the organizations who are really looking for this type of work. And that will go towards shoring up your CV during applications.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. So it's a very comprehensive answer. Yeah, I agree with all the points you mentioned, and just want to add a few. Yeah, so in some school there is also the ACM AI Club that the student they self-organize some AI events. Yeah, I find this is actually a very good opportunity, especially for students that are beginning in the NLP research or NLP practice. They can join those kind of club and then work with your senior classmate on some project, and then usually that would be a good starting point to show off that you are interested in this space. Yeah, and like Lucy said, there are many online resources, and also nowadays there are a lot of good libraries, right? Like PyTorch and many other libraries. They all have a good documentation. So maybe start with some of the NLP problem by yourself and play with a tutorial. And then once you are familiar with those tools, then that would be easier when you reach out to senior people for help.
Great. Thank you, Lucy and Kai-Wei, for the very nice insights. Yeah, I do agree that there are different paths to reach to the resources. I also really like the point that Kai-Wei mentioned about be familiar with the coding first, so that we already have enough skill set to start any NLP project once the idea is there. Some people look at like the GitHub contributions a student have been doing to show to see their software engineering background. The other thing just one additional point that comes to my mind would be think about what's unique about you. It could also be that you speak a very interesting language that is not well explored in NLP, or you are from a community who you think, let's say, how GPT-4 answers the question for your community doesn't really make sense. Then there could be a lot of social implications you could work on. Great. We could start with one of the Slido question. That will be a more detailed variation of this. So previously we talked about in general how to apply for PhDs. I know that there are a lot of students, at least from the experience I've encountered, they are software engineers in a tech company, and then they're like seriously considering, is it better to stay in their job? Also, especially with this big layoff last year, or they're considering, should we transition to a more AI stuff? And the NLP is very hot now. So maybe a lot of software engineers are considering reposition their jobs as well. We could maybe briefly give comment. I know it might be slightly far from the academia career path.
Yeah, so I think there are many opportunity of being NLP engineering now, and also NLP is not like an island out of nowhere, right? So there are a lot of related things, like we mentioned, optimization can be part of NLP, and also software engineering is actually very important nowadays for NLP engineer. Like all these GPT model is actually built on a huge techniques, right? Not just language, but also parallel computing and optimization and machine learning, and also many others. Yeah, so I think it's very important to see what would be your position if you want to work on the NLP engineering side. That to see what is your current expertise that can helpful for this new transition.
I can add a little bit. So I guess for someone who's coming from the software engineering industry and thinking about a PhD, my first question for anyone who's considering a PhD is always like, sort of, what is your goal? I think it's really important to ask yourself whether research is really ultimately the goal, or whether you're sort of just thinking about working on similar engineering problems in a different environment. Those are very different goals. PhD is a big commitment, and over the course of 6-7 years, technology also changes a lot. The kind of job market might also change a lot. So we don't really know what, for example, an ML engineer job will look like in 6 to 7 years. This isn't really an answer to the question as much as just like another angle to consider, is kind of what ultimately is the job and the environment that you're looking for when electing to do a PhD. Yeah.
Great. Maybe we could also give some comments of how a normal PhD life is like if doing NLP or NLP plus X. I can start sharing. I feel like most of the time, at least before ChatGPT comes out, most of my time are coding large language models, reading coding models, like tuning Hugging Face once, but at least from my perspective. I also read papers about maybe 30% of my time, and keep thinking about what are good research questions to be asked. I feel relatively free from an industry setting, like compared to an industry setting where there are key maybe KPIs to achieve, and then there needs to be maybe report according to how much contribution we do for a company. But as an NLP, I feel like there's much more freedom to do curiosity driven, have fun. That's my view of PhD. Happy for any comments to like highlight the interestingness, maybe also of an NLP PhD versus PhD in other like other domains. As you mentioned, medical domain has its own challenges.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear a very optimistic view of how PhDs are, and I think that is one of the great benefits of the PhD is you have all this time to think about some problems for an extended period of time, and you can work on different projects and kind of engage with that problem in different ways. So I obviously did not do a PhD in NLP directly, although I definitely spent half of my PhD sort of working on more applied NLP problems. What is a PhD? What is the PhD life like? I think it's both extremely, like, there's tons of opportunity because you're sort of the at the core of your PhD, making connections to other parties to help you work on your problem. But at the same time, like being at the core of this problem, there are moments when it can feel very solitary. Like you're really like the person who's responsible for moving your PhD forward. And over the course of 6-7 years, there can be a lot of distractions and also emergence of technology like ChatGPT that causes existential questions like, what am I, like, where's this field going? And I think all of these things are sort of like a wonderful growing experience. So over the course of some number of years, you learn a lot about how you approach problems. And that for me has really been like, I feel like I've grown up through my PhD. It was a while back, but but I think I'm still closer to it than probably Kai-Wei is. Yeah.
Yeah, so I usually felt that the ideal case of a PhD is like you are start a startup company, right? So kind of you start up something, with a seed idea and work with your advisor, and then start to publish paper, and then thinking more, read the paper, see what others are doing, and then to grow your idea from a small seed to actually a small tree when you graduate. Yeah, and then when you graduate, then that's the time that you can start your career to based on what you have, and then to add all the thought, all the thing into it. So the PhD is like in the incubator, right? That you get a chance to actually protect by a lot of distraction, and then you can work on your own idea. Yeah, so I think that is the ideal cases.
I like the analogy of a startup incubator. Yes, we're very safe, protected by our supervisors. Yeah, and then I guess another, let's say, I might ask 2 more questions about a pre-PhD state for like non-NLP pre-PhDs. What if, I know that some things that seem easy to us might be difficult for others. I've also seen students who struggle with self-learning NLP. Like, did you encounter any challenges when you just transition into NLP? And then are there some frustrating moments because it's a totally new thing? And what are some general skills to get over these ups and downs?
I can start real fast. So I would say, like, when I started studying NLP, it's not as if I really just jumped into learning the technology with no background. So I think what came up earlier was having a strong coding background is going to be extremely beneficial for you to learn NLP. So having like strong knowledge of programming, strong knowledge of statistics, these things are going to absolutely help you. I also think coming from the other direction is helpful. So like having a strong background in linguistics can also be extremely helpful. So understanding the phenomena that people are trying to model and study. So for me, I took a graduate level NLP class that helped immensely. I think taking some sort of structured course where you're being introduced to these ideas in a systematic way, even if the class is not necessarily teaching you the latest technology, essentially having that language to then read more and dissect the newest technology is going to be helpful.
Yeah, so kind of come from a different background that is more like methodology driven. So it's more from the machine learning optimization. So the first few papers I submit, I usually got a comment that, oh, you have a fancy method, but so what? Right? Like if you don't really understand what is the key problems that NLP people are trying to solve, and then you have a method is more like you're trying to use a hammer to find a nail, then that's actually not go a long way. Yeah. So then I also take some more NLP related courses, and then read more papers, and then trying to understand what is the important problem that should be solved. Yeah, so as you may know that we later on working on those fairness related NLP thing is totally different from what I did earlier. Yeah, so that is from talk to the social scientists, and then to trying to understand what is the problem they think about the language processing technique, and then through the conversation, then we come up with those problems. Yeah, so I think talking to more people and then read more papers, that would be very helpful for thinking about what is the right problem.
Great, thanks for both highlights. That certain skills like coding and stats are generally helpful. Knowing linguistics helps knowing the problem space, and also writing papers is like at least the excitement score in the recency review feels like how relevant a problem is to NLP audience. Great. So we receive another question on Slido about if a person is already in a PhD program or graduate program, and then it's on a non-NLP graduate program, they're curious about interdisciplinary research such as NLP HCI. If they do interdisciplinary research, how should they decide which conference to publish at? Should they directly publish at NLP conferences or keep publishing in their own like original domain?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So we have some work more on the computer vision and NLP intersection. Yeah, so it's always the debate that which conference we should submit to. Yeah, my rule of thumb is that it depends on what is the key contribution of the papers. So if the key contribution is in the language side, and then the reason we want to publish paper is because we want to optimize in the impact, right? So we definitely want to submit to the place that people are interested your research. So if the contribution is more on the language side, I think NLP would be a good venue. If the contribution is on the other side, then of course you submit to the other conference. And if it is more general, then you can maybe consider some also general conference like AAAI that you have a both audience.
Yeah, so I very much fall on this spectrum between fields. So I definitely think of NLP venues like ACL as one of my home communities, but a lot of my work is also has health applications. So I'll also submit to health informatics conference and journals, as well as some occasionally to HCI venues like Kai and WIST when there's a system contribution that I'm making. So I think what Kai-Wei said is pretty much, I think that it sums up the main point, which is you want to target your work to the community that you think is going to benefit the most from your work and build the most off of your work. And the answer might not actually be obvious, right? Like sometimes you have work that really does sit at the intersection between two fields. So you might consider disseminating that work at venues, at multiple venues, maybe with some change in the way that the change in the focus of the work. Sometimes you also have these sub-communities within these venues. So certain domain-specific workshops at ACL, or maybe there's, for example, the machine learning for health workshop at NeurIPS. I always think of that as a good kind of ML plus health venue. So you can go out there and find your own community. You'll know when you find your community, because when you show up, everyone will care very much about what you're doing and give you good feedback. So go out there and find your people.
Yeah, good answers. I like the point of maximizing the interest and then finding whether you belong to a community. I want to ask a follow-up question in case any of you have experience publishing in domains which require maybe 1.5 years or 2 years, 3 years of review. How can a PhD survive this?
That's a tough question. Right. So in some cases, there's also these kind of like general science venues, these journals that have extremely long, multi-revision review cycles. So you might submit your paper and then 1.5 years later, it's finally accepted and you get camera ready. I think, at least in the NLP field, it seems like the publication rate or the expected publication rate is much higher. So we submit generally to every CL conference that comes by. There's some expectation that will be, it's like 3 to 4 papers a year or something. Like maybe that's like an overestimate, underestimate. I'm sure people have different benchmarks for themselves. But I would say, most people are not working on one project. So like, you don't have to worry too much about something like a 1.5 year publication runway, unless you're actively kind of on the job market and like trying to make it count immediately. So a little bit of planning ahead will help, right? So making sure that those really high impact things get out before you're on the job market, whereas, during the rest of your career, kind of maintaining some baseline level of productivity and involvement in other projects.
Great, thanks a lot, Lou, for the insights that put eggs in many buckets, help resolve the problem. Another little reality thing, I've been hearing about this from other students. Maybe some reality check could be try to persuade the PhD supervisor, if that person is not in NLP, to support your publication venue. So the optimal one is the one that maximizes your work's impact. But if the PhD supervisor really cares about another venue, then I would guess most people should compromise by maybe one publication a year or every 2 years in the venue that's really recognized in your supervisor's domain. And to just keep a very healthy like a mentor-mentee relationship. The other things could be if the domain matter a lot, the reviewers might think about the same paper from different perspectives. So if there's a big adjustment for the way you argue the contribution, maybe some domain care about the model innovation, but some interdisciplinary domain just need a fancy NLP model and don't even need much baselines, then like, yeah, maybe stay in the zone that you're very comfortable with. If transitioning to another domain is within your capacity, then feel free. If it's too much, then just balance the practical aspects as well. Great. So some other questions are about looking into transitioning into NLP from a different role. So far, for all the questions we answered from putting our shoes into a pre-PhD perspective, or putting us into the shoes of maybe a kind instructor instructing them. I also want to ask for two different perspectives. One is about in STAR CL paper reviews, do you feel like there's a rising trend of papers written by non-NLP background people? And then what could be some research suggestion or writing suggestions these new to NLP people could take to improve their papers, like how their paper is well perceived in the NLP community?
This is a hard question. I think one thing I would suggest is, like what I said earlier, that many people come from the machine learning background or general methodology background will forget what is the important problem NLP people are trying to solve. So trying to motivate better what is the research problem you want to solve would be very helpful in writing an NLP paper. I think the NLP community is looking actually very closely on what is the research problem you're trying to solve and what is the motivation and insight. And when you do the experiment, it's not just showing number improve or something, but what is the insight and the thing you can learn from the analysis. So those are things that I usually, when I was a reviewer, I was looking at those points. And when I was writing the paper, I would definitely suggest my student to put the focus on talking about the motivation and what is the reason you want to do this and do that. Yes. So that's one thing I can think of.
Yeah, that's definitely a really good point. So I don't know if I've noticed a significant increase in non-NLP background people submitting to STAR CL conferences, but I do sense that there's some kind of shift. Like there are more papers being submitted to these STAR CL conferences, and it's increasingly hard to get really kind of high quality reviews out to everybody. So when I feel like some of the weaker papers that I've seen, they tend to maybe just not have a good sense of what the norms are in the community. So not making it very clear what the kind of contribution of the work is, right? Like it needs to have some novelty. It needs to advance something, either methodology or data or analysis or something that the NLP community cares about. And I think that the only papers I see that are very kind of obviously maybe, or I don't want to say obviously, they're just more of a challenge to see at a STAR CL conference are the ones where it mostly just like the research contribution is not clear. So maybe working on that, reading more papers, figuring out the norms and expectations in the field. I also think the norms and expectations of the field are shifting, right? Like the way we present our findings, the way we design experiments, the way we compare our models against baselines. All of those things gradually change, I think, for the better. So kind of keeping up with those trends are something that all of us need to do from time to time.
Yeah. Great answers. So I like the point about knowing what's important for NLP, as well as picking up a bunch of norms. The norms could be learned from data-driven way of reading previous year's papers, but also we should be aware that the past didn't determine the future. There could be future changes as well. Great for this paper review for non-NLP background people saying. And then the other could be, as PhD supervisors, have you potentially received email reach out from people that are from not an NLP background among these? Or suppose you receive reach out email from people from all backgrounds, what type of combination of NLP plus X will be interesting for you to maybe potentially, if that person is added to your NLP team, then you'll be like, oh, this background is cool to explore such research questions.
Well, for me, I think this question's a little easy because I am kind of NLP plus health. So anything in that realm or kind of the biomedical realm is always a big plus for me. I find that certain types of domain expertise are harder to maybe learn than others, especially ones that require an entire degree to kind of be an expert at. But I would say, so like a lot of people, a lot of undergrads also contact me to try to get into research, and some of them do not have experience in NLP. And I always feel like the difference in my mind of like who I want to, or who I'm excited to work with versus who I'm just like, okay, this is a formulaic email, is some actual tangible engagement with my work. Like they've actually read the paper, have some connection to the projects or the kind of problems that I'm working on, can point to real examples of how they think they could bring their expertise and take these NLP methods and apply it to those problems. And that has made, that's really what I'm looking for when I read these emails.
Yeah, I think a kind of a similar answer that I work with people with all different kind of background, because of part of my NLP research is just applying NLP to everywhere. Yeah, so but I think usually the students who reach out to me and I would be interested to them is those people who are already thinking about the problem first. Yeah, like I was reached out by a PhD student in the education departments, and he was mentioning that he meet the problem that they trying to design the test for the kids, but I want to make sure that there is a fairness problem when they design the test. Yeah, for example, if they want to design essay question, then they don't want to ask people what is your activity during the snowing, right? Because in some places there's no snow. Yeah, so then they was asking this question, what would be the NLP method can help them to design a better test question so that it can be fair to every student. Yeah, so when he bring out this question, I was, oh, this is actually an interesting question I want to work on. Yeah, so then that is we start to have some collaborations.
Great, I really like the input points. So to summarize, some of them are domain expertise that are super strong, hard to ignore. These could be a medical degree equivalent, a law degree equivalent, or it could also be tons of life experience in your, like what problem your local community care about. The others could be interdisciplinary people bring interesting research problems like education and stuff. So they're actually very nice to be combined with NLP to solve them. I also see that with the rise of more powerful language models, maybe the connections to more applications, to how well it's integrated into society for different actors, there will be a huge chance for interdisciplinary people to enter NLP with your expertise. So very welcome to transition to NLP. Then we get another new question on Slido about how can I apply to a new PhD in NLP, knowing that I'm a PhD student who started in 2016 on under-resourced language in NLP, but then I stopped since COVID due to some strong reason. So I guess this person is thinking about resuming to an NLP program, potentially on other topics or the same topic, and then just there was a gap, like 8-year, no, 4 + 3, 7-year gap.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure what the program means. How can apply, because I think if you have a gap, but if you have some, for example, engineering experience during the gap, or if you learn something different during the gap, and I think that's actually a plus, maybe not a minus. Yeah, so I guess a question probably more like, because NLP changed a lot during these 7 years, so probably you need to catch up to know what is current trend, and then read more recent paper. But I don't think that the gap in your resume would be an issue.
Great, thanks a lot, Kai-Wei, for the insights. And then I do want to ask another follow-up question for people who are already in the middle of an NLP PhD, or already an NLP plus X PhD. I feel like maybe from this year and on, there will be a lot of questions about applying NLP to what, or how to integrate NLP more responsibly in our society. Maybe the general question is about for NLP plus X research, what could be some challenges working in this interdisciplinary domain, and then what are some good research questions, or the style to ask research questions that's good.
Sorry, I don't think I quite understood the question. So is the question kind of like for those who are currently in a PhD program, what?
Right. What are some? I guess I'm mostly thinking about PhDs already working on NLP plus X. If they have the capacity to refresh their research agenda, what new type of research questions could merge on top of the list?
Yeah, so I think one of the major benefits of working on NLP plus X is that the X is almost always a great source of problems. So what are people worried about or thinking about in other domains, in healthcare, in politics, in law, in whatever other sector of the world is causing problems. And I think, NLP is plus X, it's also a bidirectional relationship. So the X might be a great source of problems, but ultimately it's all language. And if you essentially are working with a domain of language that has specialized phenomena, essentially the methods that you develop on the NLP side would hopefully also lead to generalizable improvements across natural language understanding and kind of other tasks that people care about in NLP. So, NLP plus X really puts yourself, I think it puts people in this nice position where you're sort of borrowing back and forth between ideas, between these different fields. And of course, the X doesn't have to be singular either. You can also see if an approach that works in X generalizes to Y and so on. I know that's very sweeping, but yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you say. And then also, so recently there are a lot of new NLP technique emergence, right? Like GPT-3 and all these large language model become very popular, but still not solving the fundamental problem. Like when you apply to NLP plus X, how the domain expert can add in their expertise into the model and help to really solve the problem. So I still feel that we have a long way to go to really actually apply those NLP model to solve the problem that people really want to solve. Yeah, and plus there are a lot of other issues like, for example, for healthcare, there are a lot of data are confidential. You cannot put to OpenAI's GPT-3 to run the model, right? And then how to use a relatively small model, but still have those ability to deal with the text, that's still an open question. So I think there are a lot of a problem about the privacy, trustworthiness, explanation, and how to that as per expertise to embed into a model. All these questions are still unsolved.
Yeah, I really like the answer about there is a rich problem space there. It could either be application domain or taking more care into responsible NLP deployment. And also, as Kai-Wei mentioned, there will be a huge need to demonopolize large language models from maybe mostly for-profit companies. These several big names, but distributed to other sources. I also see, like, as we promote NLP for social good as well, I feel like it could be also better to put large language models on the hand of people who really care about our society and act on goodwill. Great. So at the end of the session, I actually want to conclude with an open question about looking back on your journey transitioning into NLP. One second. I was just looking at the other comment on the Slido asking, does the speaker accept volunteer researcher and any advice to secure one in top tier labs? I will quickly answer this. In the beginning of our panel, we mentioned that you're very welcome to reach out emails and also highlight how exactly you align with the target professors or PhD students you are reaching out to, and highlight what if you have diverse background, highlights if this interdisciplinary thing could align with their interests as well. So with this, back to our ending question, looking back into your journey transitioning into NLP, I guess since you are already profs, then what are the sources of happiness after transitioning into NLP? And in general, like maybe just ending suggestions to any people who are hesitating on the edge and tentatively trying.
I can try for this. So I guess the question is, now that I've kind of started as a professor, what brings me happiness, or in my NLP career, or?
Yeah,
when looking back into your decision point of whether to transition to NLP or keep the original direction.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I really want to emphasize this, which is transitioning into the field of NLP does not mean that you give up all of your previous fields, right? Like, I think a lot of our expertise in other fields that just goes towards kind of enriching our current experience and the kind of current research questions we ask, right? Like, so all of my previous experience working in medical labs, working with patients, those are things that absolutely drive the questions that I asked today. It drives the types of experiments I want to run, right? Like, do I want to run a user study with patients for an NLP tool? Yes, I absolutely want to do that because that's something that that I care about, and I think my previous background really enables me to do. So transitioning or adding a set of skills to your existing skills, I guess it should be thought of as adding a set of skills to your existing skills. And then during the during my exploration of NLP as a field and trying to decide whether I want to spend more time in it, really, I feel like a big decision point for me was kind of meeting people in the community and really finding mentors and colleagues that were really supportive of my growth and kind of like ability to thrive in the field. So I'd say for anybody who is thinking about joining a community, like that's one of the easiest ways to make the decision is, are these people that I really want to work with? Are they supportive of me? Are the problems interesting? And I think that's those things continue to be true for me. And that's why that's what continues to bring me happiness in my job. And of course, now I'm looking very much forward to working with students and other people who are embarking on this journey.
Yeah, I can try to answer this as well. So I think the most happy things after I transited to NLP is it gives me a lot of opportunity to collaborate with other people, because NLP is kind of central of many things that you can easily collaborate with, people in public health, people in the medical school, people in education, So there are a lot of, because, everyone talks about language. So language is actually a natural device. People communicate. So when you're working on language, connect with a computer, you naturally connect to almost everything. Yeah, so that is the most exciting thing I feel, that you can easily collaborate with people in other disciplinary and then really make something impactful. And plus, I think the NLP community is very friendly. So we have this kind of a panel. They have a lot of events that are trying to group people together. So this is also another thing that when I go to the conference, I meet all the friends, and then everyone is very excited about the technique, and everyone nice to each other. And I think this is not, I think the NLP community is especially kind of very kind, and I really enjoy in that community. Yeah, so in terms of suggestions for the transition, yeah, I think like Lucy said, I think it's important to keep your expertise and then see that how your expertise can connect with the NLP. And in the beginning, there will be naturally some conflict. So because people are thinking differently when you naturally grew up in different fields. But sometimes you should read the paper and see what the others doing in NLP, and then learn how to present in the NLP field. But sometimes you maybe want to persistent to say the thing I'm doing is right, and people should learn from me, right? So it's not saying that I'm the outsider, so I must need to follow the people in NLP say, or vice versa, but trying to really find the best interest and then connect the two. Yeah, and that would be my suggestion.
Sounds great. Thanks again for the wonderful set of suggestions. And I really echo with the point that text is the interface for everything. So NLP sounds like a meta skill to help any domain we're interested in. Great. And thank you again for Kai-Wei and Lucy for this very fruitful ACL mentorship session. And thanks again for making this in your evening time. And I really enjoyed the session.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting. It was great to
No problem. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.